Welcome, everybody. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe. There we go. Can you guys see the slide? Okay, great. Welcome to this month's Transition Roundup. Today we're going to talk to Carla Miller from South Dakota Parent Connections and talk about the services they have for our families and our schools.
Yep, great.
And a few dates to start with. We have more roundups coming up next month. We're October 23rd. We're talking to Independent Living Choices and may have some information for you guys on the PREETS grants through Voc Rehab for those PREETS camps in the summer. And then we're going to take a break for the holidays. Yes, we're talking about the holidays already. Didn't we just start school? Holy cow. But we're going to take a break in November and December for the holidays and come back in January, February, and April. As always, if there is a subject you'd like to hear about, you want more information about, contact your liaison. We're open to suggestions. And recordings of previous roundups can be found on the events tab at tslp.org. Lots of good information there. That last month's webinar on the ADP is still there. You can go back to that and refer to that if you need to. I know that's kind of a complicated subject. So that is there for you to look at. Some other dates we've got going on. Catch the College Wave is coming up very, very quickly. October 22nd at NSU here in Aberdeen, the 23rd at SDSU in Brookings, November 6th at Mitchell Technical College, and November 13th at Western Dakota Tech in Rapid City. So those are the Catch the College Wave is in the fall this year as opposed to the spring, and then Let's Talk Work will be in the spring. So we're flipping those around on you. So if you have students you'd like to bring to Catch the College Wave, please contact your regional liaison. We're not territorial. If a event outside of your liaison's area works better for you and your students, that's absolutely fine. We'll get you in contact with that liaison to register. 26th Annual Youth Leadership Forum is coming up in June 8th through the 12th this year. Normally it's the first week of June. Because some scheduling conflicts with other camps, we're looking at the second week of June this year. Applications are up on tslp.org. We can also send you that link, or if you absolutely have to have a paper copy, we can make that happen. There is also a link for leadership. So if you know a student who's been a delegate in the past who would be a good, strong leader for us, encourage them to apply for a leadership position. We will be looking at those soon. The leader applications are due, I believe, November 20th or 22nd. I can't remember. One's the 20th, one's the 22nd. The delegates are due the December 22nd, I think it is. Maya,
I believe you're correct on that as well.
I think it's November 20th for the leaders and December 22nd for the delegates, but they're right in the neighborhood. And then, of course, our annual Transition Summer Institute will be July 8th and 9th at Arrowwood and Owakoma. Folks who have been there before will tell you we try to have some very valuable information for you, and it's worthwhile. One of my teachers that I work with came for the first time this year and really enjoyed it. So we welcome you to come and join us there. And registration will let you know when that opens in the spring. And of course, I always tell you about our Facebook page. We try to keep that updated with some interesting things that are going on around the state in the area of transition, and of course, our events and things we have going on with TSLP. So without further fuss and muss, I'd like to introduce Carla Miller from South Dakota Parent Connection. TSLP works very closely with South Dakota Parent Connection, and we consider them a very valuable resource. So Carla, take it away.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for having me today. I always welcome an opportunity to talk about South Dakota Parent Connection and what we do and how we do it and why what we do is important and how we can help you and how you can help your families. So I started here at South Dakota Parent Connection in 2016. So I've been here a little bit now. Prior to that, I taught at Dakota State University in their teacher prep program in special education. My background is I've been in the field of special education for 40 some years, for a long time. And my background in particular is kids with autism and behaviors. That's what I did in my working career when I worked in school districts. I was a classroom teacher. I was a autism team leader, evaluator, and consultant for a while. Taught at this Dakota State, as I said. So I've been in the field of special education for a really long time. And working at South Dakota Parent Connection is kind of, for me, a capstone of all those experiences. I use all of those experiences when I engage with families. Sometimes I have to help them understand from a school administrator point of view how school really functions and does work. Sometimes I have to use my teacher hat when I'm looking at IEPs and families are maybe wondering why things are on their IEP, and we're helping families to organize their questions and concerns. So when they meet with you at IEP meetings and other meetings, they know what it is they want to visit about. So I do a lot of training and teaching. So that feels like my college administrator hat. So this has just been a good capstone for me in all the years of work I've done in special education. So with that, I'm going to share the screen. I find that, hopefully it's up here, maybe not. Let me do that again. Sorry. I don't think you need to see my calendar. Let me pull up what I need here real quickly, and then I'll share it. I thought I had it bookmarked here, but there it is. Okay. Now I'll share. There we go. I don't know if any of you have been on our website, and please do feel, I much prefer a conversation and discussion than you just having to listen to me. So if you have questions along the way, just let me know, and let's visit about it. But if you haven't been on our website, I hope you do go to our website. We've been working really hard on it to make it informative and user-friendly and easy for people to access. And we're really proud of the resources that we produce for families, but also we want you as professionals to know that these resources are there for you to use also. I always say it's an open website. If there's something that catches your eye and you think, oh my gosh, I need to be giving this out to parents, please feel free to download it or send them to the website. And make use of those resources. So I'm just going to walk through it a little bit so you just know about who we are. So South Dakota Parent Connection is going to be entering its 40th year as a nonprofit in the state of South Dakota, working with families with kids with disabilities. So we started in 1985. And we have been a nonprofit that long. We're a 501c3. And we were really founded by a group of parents, administrators, teachers in South Dakota who recognized that families needed opportunity for training and information so that they could really live out that call that they have of being their child's first and best advocate, right? We tell parents that all the time. You're your child's first and best advocate. And they can only do that if they're knowledgeable. You can only be, we use other words like shared decision maker. You can only truly be a shared decision maker at a table if you have equal knowledge to the other people sitting around the table. And if you don't, you're not going to contribute. You know, you're going to sit there and shake your head. Yeah, and that can be misinterpreted as the parents are agreeing with us. And then those are the calls we get when they come after the meetings and say, first of all, I didn't understand what I was agreeing to. Will say, well, did you tell them? Well, no, I didn't, you know, it's a very scary place to be when you're sitting around that table with a bunch of professionals who are so knowledgeable, and then you want to maybe add something or disagree with what they are. So a lot of parents, unless they really feel empowered, won't speak up. So that was a recognition that there was a need for how do we help parents grow in their knowledge and understanding and comfortableness to really be that advocate for their child. So the South Dakota Parent Connection was born, and here we are 40 years later. So that's quite an accomplishment. We are governed by a board of directors, by our bylaws and by the mandates of our federal grants. All of our 50% of our board members have to be parents of an individual with a disability, ages birth through 26, and with either a disability or a special health care need. And so that's important, because when we are making decisions about what we do as an organization, the people behind those decisions, how we spend our money, what our initiatives are, strategic planning, are people who have been there, done that, and have that lived experience with their child, young adult, who has a disability. So that is very important to us. If you want to know who our board of directors are, you can go to our website. You can see who they are. There's a little bio about them and who they are. Whoops, sorry. I always go back too far, so you'll have to. My staff are much more techie savvy than I am. Remember, I've been doing this for over 40 years, which makes me old. Okay, so that's who our board is. Our staff is also located here, so you can go and read about who our staff are. We're really privileged and actually unique in the whole parent training and information world, in that all but one person on our staff is also a parent of an individual with a disability. And they also have a professional background in the field of education or special education. So again, we have all had those lived experiences. We've sat at the table as a parent and have been part of deciding what programs and supports our own children need. But then we also, like myself, I've been in the field, so I also have that professional background and understanding of systems and how systems work and what's out there for families. So if you want to learn more about who our staff are, you can go on here and you can read about them. We are located, our main office is here in Sioux Falls, but we also have an outreach specialist in Aberdeen. Kate, I think you work with Tina a bit. We so appreciate our relationship with TSLP. And then we have an outreach specialist in Rapid City. And so we are statewide with 11 staff, 4 of us who are full-time and everybody else part-time. So we do an incredible amount of work with a small staff, but we're a knowledgeable staff. So, and our mission really is to connect those families of children ages birth to 26 with either disabilities or healthcare needs to information and training and resources in that environment of support, hope, and respect. And that's what they get when they call in. It is truly one of the things that makes our organization unique, is that lived experience that we bring to the table. One of the other things that makes our organization unique is when you call, you don't get a call this dial number, push this dial, get to this. You get a human person. If you call, anytime that our office is open, you will get a human person on the line. So yeah. All right. So the other thing about us, we have a couple hats that we wear. The first hat that we wear is we are the Parent Training and Information Center for South Dakota. And we have been that since the inception of that program. So you are all familiar with IDEA. And back during one of the revisions of IDEA, funding was made available to states for a parent training and information center. And you had to be a nonprofit. You could not be part of a state system, a school system. You had to truly be independent of any of those systems. So South Dakota Parent Connection had just gotten started. And so they applied for that first federal grant, and we received that. And that is a 5-year grant award. Every year we have to send in a report saying how we're doing. And then every 5 years we have to recompete for that money. And we have successfully competed for that money ever since 1985. And we have been able to get that grant. So we've been the only parent training and information center. And the money that we get from the Office of Special Education under that grant allows us to provide all of our services free to families. So we do not charge families for anything, whether it's resources or technical assistance, our information and training and consultation to families is free. And so what we do is under our, if you think of that as an umbrella for our program, is we assist families in understanding about resources and supports that are out there. We help them, for example, understand what schools' responsibilities are and what their rights are under IDEA. We train them on how do you work with professionals in your child's life. We connect them to other resources that are important to their child's needs, and we connect them to other parents. We just had a dad in this morning that has a child with a rare syndrome. She is one out of 100 children in this nation that has that syndrome. And so we were in here connecting him to resources. We and then connecting him to other families that he could reach out to talk about, you know, what does the future look like for my 7-year-old? Because there's another family out there who has a 15-year-old that he can connect with. And like I said earlier, we want to empower families to be, you know, those decision makers. And in order to do that, they have to have that information to do that. We are part of a national organization. As I said, every state has at least one. It's based on population. So some of the bigger states have more than one. New York, I think, has 5 parent training and information centers. And we're supported through a regional technical assistance center. Ours is out of Wisconsin, and so they help us. They're our technical assistance center. And so that's one of our umbrella, our hats that we wear under our umbrella as a nonprofit here in South Dakota. The other one is we are also the Family to Family Health Information Center. So several years after the Office of Special Education funded the PTIs, the Maternal and Child Health Care Act at the national level in 2005 decided to make money available to every state for a family to family health center. And so we applied for that. And in some states, like in North Dakota, the PTI and the F2F are 2 totally separate entities, but we applied, and some other states have applied this way to also host that grant, and we were able to get that grant. And so that's a competitive grant that you have to compete every 2 to 3 years. It kind of changes every now and then. And we've been able to successfully get that grant ever since it was made available in 2005. We find that these 2 grants, the PTI and the F2F, are a good marriage because we know a lot of kids with disabilities have co-occurring healthcare challenges. And so that F2F grant allows us to provide resources and help and information to families who have kids who have those long-term healthcare needs. And so it wraps around those services for those families, because that dad who was in here with a child with a rare genetic disability, she also has learning challenges. She's on an IEP at her school. So not only is she's getting ready to go in for more surgeries related to some craniofacial deformities, but she also receives speech therapy because she's hard to understand. She gets occupational therapy because she has foreshortened and missing fingers, so she's not a writer. So she needs some accommodations related to writing. And she has some other developmental delays related to her disability. So we can help him connect to all those services in a wraparound way to meet her whole needs as a child, not just her health or her school-related needs. And so we are the Family to Family Health Care Center also. And then several years ago, long before I was here, about 11 years ago, 12 years ago now, the South Dakota Department of Education Office of Special Education Programs reached out to us, and they had created what is called the Navigator program. And it's really probably the program schools know us the best by as our Navigator program. And it's really meant to be a pre-complaint program. So the goal of the Department of Special Education in South Dakota is that things shouldn't have to get to the point where families feel like they have to file a complaint against their school district. How do we prevent that? And so they have offered us a contract, and we contract with people we call peer navigators. And, you know, first we work with families under that umbrella of the PTI grant. We first work with families to see, can we help that family be the person at the table who is knowledgeable and informed and can work with their district to get their child's needs met. But if for some reason that's been going on and it's just not working and it's getting contentious, then we can assign a navigator, and the navigator can work more closely with the parent. They can go to the IEP meetings with the parent. The goal of the navigator program is to keep the lines of communication open between the parent and the school district and to keep things moving positively towards the best solution for the child, the best outcome for the child. And we have to remind people, lots of times parents will call and say, I need an advocate, right? Well, we're not an advocacy office. We cannot advocate. So instead, we describe that program more as we're a coach on the side. We're there to coach the parents, to be there, to empower them, work with them ahead of time, help them make sure that they're clear in what their community. Sometimes what's going on between schools and families is really miscommunication. And is a parent really understanding what the role of the school is and what the school is trying to tell the parent? But likewise, is the school really understanding the need that the parent is trying to express related to their child? And that navigator can help with that, but they can't advocate. They can't take over in the meeting and speak for the parent. They have to truly be kind of that coach on a side, as I said. And we've been really successful in this program. Before this program, there were a lot of state complaints filed. And now nationally, we're like kind of at one of the lower states for the number of states complaints that are filed. So that's a win for us. And certainly we hear the most from parents, but occasionally I will get a school administrator who will call and say, Carla, I don't know what we're doing, but whatever it is, we just can't get on the same page with this family. Can you help us? And to me, that's a win when a school reaches out and said, we don't want to be in that position with this parent. We don't want to be at odds with a parent. Can you help us help get where we are both on the same page towards getting this resolved before it has to get more contentious? There are certain circumstances where we will assign a navigator right away. If you are an employee of the district that is serving your child, we will probably assign a navigator because that's a threatening position. I was the employee of the district that served my child when he was in school. It's hard to sit at a meeting and feel like you're going up against the school district who writes your check. You always worry, is that going to come back to bite me in some way? And so we automatically, usually, I won't say 100% of the time, but usually we'll assign a navigator if you are employed by the district serving your child. If the parents themselves have a disability and are struggling to understand, we will automatically assign a navigator to help them navigate those processes, because you guys know, you sit at those tables, they're very complex. But those are the three basic programs that we have. Two that are federally funded, this one that's state funded. And then we have a variety of other contracts that I can tell you about. But do you have any questions or comments about those three before I kind of move on? And maybe Kate, you can help me monitor the chat box.
Yep, I am watching the chat box, and so far, no questions.
Okay, so some of the other work we do before I move off this page is we do get sometimes contracts from other organizations. For example, right now, we have a contract with a statewide family engagement center, and they knew we were doing some work related to transition age youth and asked how could they help us with that. And so they helped us fund, I don't know if you heard about it, but last year we had a class for teachers working with transition age youth. It was called Helping Youth and Families Navigate the Transition Process. We had 15 teachers from around the state that met one Saturday a month for about 2.5 hours, and they went through kind of the whole transition process, but from the lens of how do you help families understand this? How do you share this information with families so that you see tangible changes in their participation when you sit down at those IEP meetings and have those discussions related to transition? And then that culminated with those teachers got to go to the transition conference this summer in July. Their hotel and the registration were paid through this funding that we secured through the SFEC. So it was a wonderful class, and I think the response we got from the teachers was that the information was really valuable, and some of them said the only way they would have ever gone to that transition conference is because that funding had been provided. So we felt really good about that. So there are other contracts that we'll get asked to work on. A couple years ago, the state was engaged in a statewide it's called the SPDIG, State Performance Grant, Professional Development Grant, and it was focused on reading. And so they contracted with us to develop some resources for parents on how to understand how kids in school are taught to read, and then what can you do to partner with your child's teacher to promote better reading by working with your child at home. So then we did some training for parents on understand that and did some resources. So when it involves how we engage parents as partners, sometimes other entities will reach out and offer us some contracted work to work with them on that. So that kind of depends. These three are pretty stable. The others kind of come and go depending upon the work. So, and then I'll just share a little bit about our resources. So we have these tabs across the top that direct you to our resources. Our events kind of talk about what's coming up next for us, and they're not just for us, but around the state. We get a lot of organizations send us their news and ask us to put it on our website and ask us to put it in our WeConnect newsletter. But in our learning library, we have, open up for me now. I always like to do show and tell, and then, oh, it says view only. Let's see, why isn't it opening? Let me see here. We just launched our new website not long ago. Should open up. We had them working on it yesterday, so I'm going to go back. Okay, we're going to come down here. Okay, so I'll just go in through this way. So what we do for families is the number one thing we do is we provide individualized assistance. So if you wonder what we do on a day-to-day basis, is our phone rings off the hook with parents who are calling. And I always make sure people understand, because I don't want to just sound like I'm talking negatively about anybody, but you do need to understand that we don't usually get calls from parents who say, I want to tell you how wonderful my child's school program is, right? And when things are going well, let's just keep it going well and get on with the business of life. But when things aren't going well, I'm going to start looking for help and support. And so, by and large, the calls we get are from families who are not happy about what is going on with their child's school program. Sometimes we get calls from parents who will say, I'm concerned, I've been noticing things about my child. And it's kind of like when you're a parent and you kind of know something's not right, it's like opening a Pandora's box. You don't know what's going to happen. And so sometimes you don't want to open it. And we'll say, well, for how long have you been noticing this? Well, their preschool teacher kind of mentioned it to me, but we thought maybe they'd grow out of it. And so, and then last year, the kindergarten teacher was kind of concerned, but now this year, I don't think we can ignore it anymore, right? And so they're afraid to open that box. So we're a safe place for them to open that box, to talk to us about, well, what are you seeing? What are you concerned about? I'm concerned about my child's behavior. I'm concerned about their aloofness. They're not making friends. They're not talking as much as they should be talking. People are suggesting to us that maybe they have autism, but we don't want to really talk about that, right? So we talk about why it's important to address your concerns early, talk about your concerns, get your concerns looked at, and then what would that look like? So if you went to your doctor and you said to your doctor, I'm concerned about my child's development, what might your doctor say or do? If you went to your school district and said, I'm concerned about what, I'm seeing, I'm concerned about things that my teacher has shared about how my child's doing at school, what might be the school's response to that, right? And what could you expect? Because if you help parents understand what to expect, it's not so fearful. But when you don't know what to expect, you don't want to open that box. Because like I said, it's like a Pandora's box. You don't know what's going to happen when you open it. Sometimes parents will call and say, my school district has talked to me, conferences are coming up, our year cycles, even though we're 12 months, our year cycles with the school year. And so you guys are getting ready to do conferences pretty soon. I can't believe we're talking about holiday breaks, but we're already kind of at conference season, right? And so parents are going to go to conferences and they're going to start hearing from teachers about concerns, and we're going to start getting a lot of calls. I went to my child's conference. They said, my child isn't, this or that, or they're concerned about this or that. They want me to sign this paperwork, giving them permission to evaluate my child. And I don't know what that means. I don't know sometimes they sign it and they bring it in and say, I don't know what I signed, but they told me I needed to sign this and I don't know what I signed. So again, we educate them on, if your school district wants to evaluate your child, then this is what that means. This is what they're going to ask you to do. If they have you sign the paperwork, this is what the process is that starts happening. This is what you can expect. A school psychologist is going to do this kind of a test. The teacher's going to look at these kinds of things. Somebody's probably going to call you and interview you and visit with you about what you're seeing at home. And you take away the mystique related to what's going to happen, and parents can take a breath and say, okay, I can do that. I could do that. I can do that. I get that. That's fine. And then they're going to meet with you. Well, when are they going to meet with you? And then we teach them all about those timelines, right, that are involved, and how to understand. For some parents, they'll call and say, I signed that paperwork and now it's taking forever. Well, it's not really taking forever. They just need to know that we only count school days, right? They're counting, I signed it on this day and now it's 15 days later, but it's not really 15 days later. It's really only like 7, because we don't count those weekends, right? So what can feel like is taking forever, my school is taking forever, is really not taking forever. And so we help them learn and understand all that. And then how do you prepare for that meeting? What are you going to hear? What are some of the potential outcomes of the fact that they evaluated your child? How do you prepare yourself? What kind of questions do you have? How can we help you prepare your questions so when you go in, you're ready to talk to them, and you don't walk out of there thinking, oh shoot, I was going to ask them this. And because your emotions get involved, because they're talking about your baby, you forget everything that you were going to ask when you go in there, right? Or you get overwhelmed with the amount of information they share. And then somebody says, okay, so do you have any questions? And you go, nope, because you're now just like overwhelmed, right? So we try to help parents be prepared. We always advise parents that ask for those evaluations before the meeting. I don't think it's very fair to hand parents all that new information ahead of time, or right there at the day of the meeting, without any opportunity to read what it is they're going to hear and then think they're going to be able to respond to that. Just think about, I used to tell my students at Dakota State, someday in your special education career, you might be the person who has to share with a parent for the first time that their child has a disability. And if you as a parent have to hear that for the first time at a table in a conference room in front of a whole bunch of professionals you don't know well, and have an appropriate reaction, that's not fair, right? That somebody should be calling that parent and say, let me go over this information with you before you get to the meeting, or at a minimum, at least let them read it. So maybe they can reach out to someone like us that can say, okay, this is what it appears like this information is telling you. So you need to be prepared when you go to that meeting. They're probably going to want to talk to you about these categories that kids can qualify under. And there's things like a cognitive impairment. There's things like autism. It looks like they're seeing some red flags for autism. So you need to be prepared that they're going to probably want to talk to you about that. So parents don't go in cold turkey and say, because the minute you say your child has autism, we think your child is, they stop listening to anything else if it's the first time they've had to hear it, right? So we try to take all of that first time information for parents and make it manageable for them so they can come to you at those meetings and actually participate and walk out of there feeling like they were part of a team that made decisions from a place of knowledge and not a place of reactivity or lack of reaction because they don't know what to do or say, okay? Sometimes parents ask for evaluations and we teach them the same. If you're going to ask your school for an evaluation, number one, we always tell parents to put all your requests to school districts in writing, because IDEA says that if you ask in writing, school districts have to respond in writing, and they either need to say, yep, we're going to do it, or no, we're not. And if we're not, why aren't we? And then you as a parent have recourse, right? And most of the time, there has to be a really, really, really good reason why a school district would not honor a parent request to evaluate. And I've had parents say, well, we just evaluated him, 6 weeks ago. Well, that's a pretty good reason to not evaluate again, because there's a thing called validity. And if you evaluate too soon, then the results are invalidated because a student might be familiar with the questions you asked the last time. And they might have learned something through the evaluation process that now impacts the score. So there's some validity to not evaluating too close together. But if it's been 6 months, you can reevaluate. Or more than likely, what is it that you want them to reevaluate? They just evaluated, what is it that you think needs to be reevaluated? And sometimes it's just one thing, right? We want more information about this area. Well, since then we've been to see somebody who said our child has dyslexia, and we want them to look at that my child's reading again. Okay, well then let's ask the district for that, not maybe the whole shebanger. Let's do some additional assessment in the area of reading that might look a little deeper into areas that are impacted by dyslexia, because maybe the child might qualify for some help that wasn't revealed through a more global assessment. So we help parents with all of that, and that all happens through that individual assessment. And sometimes they come in, a lot of times it's over the phone. We send a lot of information back and forth through email, but it's the largest share of what we do when we do that. And then, of course, it's here we go, our learning library. I don't know, I'll have to let my web person know they didn't open up there. But we create a lot of resources. Probably the one that is really hot right now is what parents should know about special education in South Dakota. You probably are maybe familiar with that. It looked differently. This is a joint effort between South Dakota Parent Connection, Disability Rights South Dakota, and the Center for Disabilities. This is often referred to as the Parent's Guide to Special Education, or the Special Education Guide. And it basically tells parents, I'm going to find a page down here. What does IDEA say? How South Dakota, it's going to have lots of, definitions. Lots of definitions in there for parents. I want to get to no page. Okay. All right. So it pretty much says, what's the purpose of Part B of IDEA? How does it apply to the work of state and local education? Okay, so what the heck does that say? Well, this is what that regulation says. The purpose of Part B is this: to ensure that all children with disabilities have a free public education, right? And then it'll go on to say, maybe what does that mean for you, parents? Because it's a lot of legalese talk. What does that mean for you? And what else should you know about that? So one of the things that parents need to know, that when we talk about a free, appropriate public education, it is not a one-size-fits-all law, right? That these have to be decisions that are made on an individual basis that addresses the unique needs of each child. And so amongst all that this up here had to say about it, this is the thing that we think parents have to keep in mind, that it has to be individualized, okay? And sometimes there is state, like under child find here, what does the federal regulations say about child find? That every school district needs to conduct child find. What does that mean if a child is from out of state? So what does that mean for parents, and what should you know? It means that your schools have to take an active role in looking for children who have disabilities. They need to advertise that we're doing screenings, right? Now, the other thing that comes into place with child find is some people think this just means when kids are little. No, if you have a 16-year-old who all of a sudden is failing and not doing well, and we all, as educators, you kind of know something's going on. Schools have an obligation to do child find. If you believe something's going on, you need to investigate it. It isn't just for little kids. And so we can't turn a blind eye to not looking into concerns because of a child's age or grade level. When my son was a junior in high school, he had been on a 504 plan, and he was really struggling with all the math courses. And I thought, you know what, he's not going to graduate because he got to pass that galldarn algebra class, right? So I thought, he has a high IQ, he's doing well in it. Why is he not passing this math stuff? And so I asked his school district to evaluate him for a learning disability in math, and they said, he's a junior. We don't evaluate kids when they're juniors in high school. If he had a learning disability, that would have been found years ago. And I'm like, no, you can't say that. You know, if you look at just the number of attempts he's had to pass this math class, he's taken the course 3 times now. There's an obvious need here, and you have to evaluate. And they did. They had to evaluate him. And he didn't qualify. It was close, but he didn't. But at least we knew it wasn't because of a perceived learning disability that we had missed, right? And so under Child Find, they had an obligation to evaluate, even though he was a junior in high school. And then sometimes in the chapters, it'll say, how does South Dakota has codified law that addresses laws, the federal laws that get written. And so in South Dakota, this is how they interpret that law. Okay, and so that's important to know. So, okay, so this guide goes all the way through to transition age youth. And so as long as you are a student in a school district receiving special education services, these laws apply to you. And so it's brand new, end of the summer, updated. We've had it for a long time, but we just updated it at the end of the year, or end of the summer. And there will be hard copies available here by the end of October. But if you want this, you could download this on your computer and have it available to refer to. We have some of the colleges that require their SPED 101 classes to buy this as a supplemental guide. And I've had students say, I've written papers for my college classes utilizing some of these resources, right? But if you're working with parents and you want to be assured you know what you're doing, or you want to help them understand, this is just a really helpful guide. You know, it's written for parents to be able to read and understand, so that makes it a good read for everybody. So that's one of our newer guides that are out there. Some of the other ones that are out there, see if I can go back without, this one, behavior is a concern. We wrote this book because the number one reason we get calls has to do with behaviors. I bet none of you are surprised, because that's what we hear is the biggest struggle in schools right now is kids and behaviors. And so we talk to parents about behaviors every day. And in particular, we were getting calls from parents who said, my school is calling me to come and pick up my kid because they're misbehaving. And those kids were on IEPs with behavior plans, being served in programs that were supposed to be meeting their needs behaviorally. And they were still calling parents to come and get them. So we thought, again, we wrote this with disability rights. We like to work with disability rights. They are a protection and advocacy group for the state of South Dakota. They are a legal organization. So they give us a lot of legal guidance, because we're not, to make sure we're interpreting things accurately from a legal point of view. But this guide and a lot of our guides are like question and answer. It's if a parent were asking a question, what do I do if I have concerns for my child's behavior? Well, here's some things you might want to consider. You know, has something changed at home? Is this new behavior or not? How long have you, and how often have you noticed the behavior? When does it occur? What happens prior to the behavior? Where does it occur? Has anybody else expressed concern? What do you do at home to help? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Consider doing the following, right? And then what happens if my school has reached out to me and has said, we're concerned about your child's behavior? And then what does it mean if they want to do a functional behavioral assessment? What is a behavior intervention plan? What does that look like? And then what does it mean that they'll evaluate my child, right? There's some sample forms in there. What's the difference between a medical diagnosis and a school determining my child has a disability? So my doctor has said my child has ADHD, so why isn't that good enough for the school, right? Well, the school has to do, the doctor has diagnosed ADHD. Now schools have to determine whether or not that ADHD is interfering with learning and qualifies that child for support in special education under IDEA. There's a difference between a diagnosis that a medical doctor would make and a determination of eligibility that school districts have to do under IDEA. Parents don't know that. Doctors don't know that. Parents don't know that. But using those terms, a diagnosis versus determination, is a really good way of helping parents understand why, when they come to school with a prescription from a doctor for speech therapy, and the school says, we don't have to do that, why don't they have to do that? Because doctors can't prescribe school-based services, right? But if a doctor is seeing it, that might be enough grounds for child fine to be enacted, for a district to say, maybe if a doctor is concerned enough they're sending us a prescription, we better evaluate to see if the student needs help in that area. And then we do the whole, how do kids qualify? Because we know there are kids out there. My son had ADHD and didn't qualify for a 504, for an IEP. He had a 504 plan because even though he was identified as having a disability, it didn't show educational impact, right? And so parents need to know that just because your child has a disability doesn't mean that they are going to necessarily get special education services. And they don't know that. They hear my child has dyslexia, my child has cerebral palsy. Well, not all kids with cerebral palsy need special education services, right? If they can access their learning environment, they might not need that. They might need a 504 plan. So what's the difference between an IEP and a 504 plan? And how will they help with my child's behaviors? What does it mean if my child is getting tiered instruction? That is a frequent question. Schools say, well, your child's receiving tier 2 instructions. What does that mean? I don't know what that means. And so this book just really goes on to explain. It explains manifest determination. It explains what happens if kids who are on IEPs get suspended. It explains what you can do when a school district calls. You know, we tell parents, if a school district calls you, you say, is my child hurt? Yes. Okay. Someone will be right there to get him. No. Are you suspending him? No. You know, is my child, you know, if you're suspending him, I'll be there. If not, let's set up a time to meet, right? Because schools can't just send kids home. If you're going to send a child home, you have to count it as a day of suspension, even if you sent them home at 8:15 in the morning. A day is a day once the school bell rings. And then what are parents' rights related to if my child is on an IEP and they get suspended or expelled? So it's just a really powerful book for families to understand that. And then another one that we just got done doing is that, I don't know if you have seen it or not. Let's see what comes up. We did a book called Preparing for the Future, Understanding Guardianship and Alternatives to Guardianship. So that's the other one that we get a lot of questions right now about. Behaviors is the highest, transition is the second highest right now. And that's a national trend. And I was just in Pierre not long ago, and we reviewed the state indicators. And the area that showed up red for not meeting the state indicators was transition. The number of kids with disabilities graduating and the number of kids with disabilities dropping out. Our kids are struggling. They're struggling nationally and they're struggling in South Dakota. But we get family members who walk in the door and say, my school told me I need to get guardianship, right? And guardianship is one alternative to other ways families can support their youth as they're reaching adulthood. And families aren't necessarily hearing about those other alternatives. They're just told your child's going to be turning 16 or 18, you need to get guardianship. And if they say why, they're not finding that very many people can explain to them why, right? So we wrote this guide again with Disability Rights South Dakota. And again, it's in that question answer format. Why is it important for me to learn about guardianship or conservatorship, right? Because at age 18, your child becomes an adult, and all rights and responsibilities that every adult has, your child's going to have, irregardless of the fact that they have a disability. So if they're going to need support because they're not ready to handle those rights and responsibilities, how can you as a family member support them? And then the guide goes on to talk about, you know, when we'll be notified about that, what other options are there available, right? And so certainly we want to engage in our state in a process of supported decision-making. In order for that to really be effective, we have to start young. Like, we believe that these discussions start needing to happen with those middle schoolers about ready to transition to high school, because you can't really start introducing supported decision-making at 16, 17, and 18 and think that youth are going to participate. They have to learn about this younger, so they're ready to participate when you're ready to have those conversations. So supported decision-making is one thing we can do to help youth and families prepare for that day when we say, okay, we need to think about the future, okay? There are other ways, dual signature bank accounts. My son has ADHD. He's highly impulsive. When he was a young adult, a teenager and young adult, he was horrible with money. If he got money, it was in and out. And I'd say, what did you spend it on? And he really didn't know because he was an impulsive spender. So we had a dual signature bank account. I had access to his bank account and I could move money around. I could move money from his checking to his savings. So when he got a check, I could automatically go in and take some money, slip it into a savings account. So he didn't have access to all of it. He just had to give me permission to do that. So for some families, all they have to do is work with their teenager, get permission and have that dual signature bank account, help them manage their money if that's their only concern. You don't need guardianship to do that, right? Becoming a representative payee on their Social Security, what does that mean? Parents need to know that that's one way that they can support their child. Power of attorney. Parents can get a legal document called a power of attorney, which gives them the ability to act on behalf of their son or their daughter. It doesn't take away any of their rights. It just is there. They can be an agent for them and act for them and help them make those make decisions related to either medical or financial. And then there's something called a durable power of attorney. And a durable power of attorney is the same. It just means that with a power of attorney, if the person that you are the agent for passes away or is incapacitated, that's it. Your ability to make decision for them ends. But if you have durable power of attorney, if they're incapacitated, you can continue to make decision for them. And this is regardless of, we did durable power of attorney for my sister. We moved my sister here. She had a chronic disease. She didn't have dementia, but it started giving her the effects of dementia. And we needed to be able to make decisions for her. And we got durable power of attorney. And when she passed away, we were able to continue to make decisions regarding her estate because we had durable power of attorney. That's kind of the difference between the two. And then it talks about healthcare and financial. And then when should you really consider guardianship or conservatorship? What does it mean? If you have full guardianship or limited guardianship or temporary. So you can see that there are so much more involved than just telling parents you need to get guardianship. But most of this does not get explained to parents. And so they come in and say, my kid's going to be 18 in 4 months. We need to get guardianship, right? And maybe the kiddo doesn't. I met with a family not long ago, and they came in and they wanted help filling out paperwork for guardianship. Well, first of all, we're not a legal organization. We can't help them do that, but we could help them understand the forms. So when they sat down with an attorney, they could do that. But we said, do you need guardianship? And they were like, well, yes. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it. And when they got done, what they really decided they needed was durable power of attorney. And their son was sitting right there with them, having full conversation and agreeing, but they didn't know that was even an option for them to do that. So if you're working with transition age youth, this guide, whoops, I'm trying to find my button, is there. You can download it. Like I said, all of our information is free to families. If you request it, we'll have to charge you as a professional. Our grants don't pay for free services for professionals, but it's like $10. So if you want a hard copy, you can always go down. We have what is called contact us, a contact form. You fill it out and tell them, I would like a copy of the guardianship guide. And we typically will call you and say, if you make a donation to us for $10, we'll send it to you. And then you can get a copy, or if you're in town here, or if you're in Aberdeen, you can reach out and you can get one in Aberdeen or Rapid City. And then here are the rest of the guides that we have. We have one called Dare to Dialogue, which is frequently asked questions that we get from parents. There is a smaller brief we have guides, which are these bigger volumes, and then we have parent briefs, which are just little 2 to 4 page briefs on things like what parents should know about the difference between the ADA 504 and IDEA, what parents should know about reaching 18. This is a short version of what you should know about reevaluation. We just updated our bullying brief. So there's a whole bunch of other ones in there that you can look at if you like. And oops, it moved on. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, there's a few more in there. Our website also over here, You can increase and decrease font to read it. If you are a low reader, you need that. And it also translates into a bunch of languages if you need that. So that's kind of who we are. And you can tell about what it is that parents are calling and talking to us about by the resources that you see on our website, because we start building resources around the things we're hearing the most about. So one of the things I'm going to stop sharing now, you can see in the future, we're doing a brief on school avoidance and the high absenteeism. Why do kids not want to go to school? So we're working on that one. We are doing a brief on understanding executive function delays and especially how those impact behavior, because we are finding a lot of kids who it's identified in the reports that they have executive function delays, but those delays aren't being addressed on their IEP, and they're getting in trouble for a lot of things that if you just saw that they were related to executive functioning and you were working towards remediating some of that, they may not be getting into some of the trouble that they are. Let's see, there's another one that's coming out. What do we have? Oh, we are putting together a cheat sheet related to dispute resolution, kind of a flow chart for families that helps them understand that there's more services available to them through the state than just filing a complaint. You can have a mediator, you can have IEP assistance. So there are things out there, and those should not be things that are scary to anybody because they're just there to help. There are regional reps that I hope schools take advantage of their state regional reps, and parents need to know that the regional reps are out there to help so that we don't have to get to a place of conflict with families. Yeah, so those are the ones that are coming up. And then I just wanted to share with you, so we just got done looking at our surveys from all the things we did last year. And one of the questions we ask families is, what does a positive family-school partnership look like? So I just thought I would share the response to that for you. You might find it interesting. So 56%, now not everybody fills it out. You give them a survey and they can rate you from 1 to 4. That gets filled out most times, but then there's 2 or 3 questions, and then not everybody takes the time to fill out the questions. So it isn't 100% response rate, but of those who responded, 50% responded with some statement related to good, clear, consistent communication as the best indicator of a positive school family partnership. 36% responded to working as a team, collaborating, or having a good working relationship as being important. And then 15% responded with statements related to understanding and respecting where families are at in their life, poverty, stressors, trauma, understanding and respecting cultures and diversity. 15% I kind of lumped those together into that 15%. And then there were other individual comments related to like person-centeredness, working towards making sure parents understand what is going on at school, what you're sharing with them, information and resource sharing, having appropriate expectations, shared decision-making, and then feeling safe were the additional comments that were made. So that's who we are in a big nutshell. And we do this all day, and we work with parents individually on this. We do a lot of training. We go to a lot of the state conferences to talk about working with families, to talk about the information that we're sharing with families in the hopes that we're all kind of working on it together and sharing the same information. I would take any questions that you have for me because I talk a lot and I talk fast. So what questions would you have for me about our services and supports to families and to you guys? Any questions at all?
I'm not seeing any at the moment in chat, but folks can unmute and just ask, or
Yeah, you can just unmute and ask if you have anything.
I know we pass out that guide to guardianship that is, we've been passing that out to all of our schools, hoping to get at least one copy to every teacher. That's very valuable. And of course that what parents should know. I got that the first time years and years ago when my son was still in services. So very helpful, very handy to have these things on hand.
Yeah, it's been around for a long time. We were waiting and waiting to revise it because we kept hearing that there was going to be some changes to IDA at the federal level. And then they didn't change it. And then they did. Finally, we were like, we got to get this thing revised. So we just revised it. So hopefully come January, we don't hear, oh, they're changing some things and now. But it is in a much more, with technology, the new format will make it a lot easier to make changes if we need to than the old format. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Well, it appears you must have explained it well enough that everybody's got it, and we're a little after 4 o'clock. So thanks again so much for
Yeah.
coming. We
You're welcome.
appreciate it so much.
If you
And
ever have questions, just call. I have people call all the time, and sometimes they don't want to tell me where they work, and they'll just say, "Can you just clarify? I think I'm doing this right, but I mean, this is kind of what I told a parent, and is that right?" We're a safe place to come and visit with. So if you need anything, just give us a call.
sounds good. And of course, we stay in close contact with you guys. So
Yep.
thanks again.
Thank you for inviting me. It was good to see you all. Have a good day.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
And everybody come back next month to talk with Independent Living Choices and about their services. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next month.